Talk boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The recent updates to the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list.
A conversation we're going to have to break down into segments.
A conversation that we can only really have at length because we are talking about the most decorated fighters in the entire sport. When it comes to Claressa Shields' big win this weekend over her rival, Savannah Marshall.
Claressa Shields, who occupies the number 2 spot on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list.
Ahead of the fight, I told you guys, I told you ahead of time, if Claressa beats Savannah, great win that might be.
That won't be enough for Claressa to advance ahead of Katie on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list because Katie will have still taken more belts from more champions.
In terms of championship scalps, Katie's got Claressa beat out 5 champions to 4. In 2 divisions, Katie's faced more champions than Claressa has faced in 3. You often hear people say that, well, Claressa's a 3-time undisputed champion. How could Katie Taylor be ranked ahead of her? Well, that's why. In the 2 divisions Katie's campaigned in, she's beaten more world champions and taken their belts than Claressa has in 3 divisions.
Anaí Sanchez, Victoria Bustos, Rose Volante, Delphine Persoon, Christina Leonardatu.
5 champions to Claressa's 4. Nikki Adler, Christina Hammer,
Marie-Eve Dicaire,
and, more recently, Savannah Marshall.
In spite of Claressa having been a champion at more weights than Katie,
Katie actually beat more champions in 2 divisions than Claressa has in 3. You don't think about their resumes overall, their resumes as a whole. Both Claressa Shields and Katie Taylor debuted as professionals in the same year. They debuted as professionals in 2016, but Katie Taylor has fought 8 more times than Claressa has.
That's saying that not only has Katie beaten more champions than Claressa has, she fights a lot more often than Claressa does.
A lot more often. You think about Katie Taylor's fight with Jessica McCaskill and how Jessica went on to become a 2-division undisputed champion who beat several champions herself.
You think about her victory over Natasha Jonas last year,
and how this year Natasha Jonas is a unified junior middleweight champion.
The victory over Amanda Serrano.
Amanda Serrano, who is quite easily a more decorated fighter than any fighter you'll find on Claressa Shields' resume.
She's easily a first ballot Hall of Famer.
And a pound-for-pound fighter, which I'm sorry to say, Marie-Eve Dicaire was not. Savannah Marshall was not.
She didn't make it to the point to where she was a pound-for-pound fighter.
Nikki Adler, the first champion that Claressa ever beat. She wasn't a pound-for-pound fighter either.
These cross comparisons should not be confused with trashing Claressa Shields' resume.
Claressa has one of the very best resumes in the entire sport of women's boxing, but we are comparing her resume to Katie Taylor's resume. And when we do that, it really isn't close. Not only is Katie Taylor a more active fighter than Claressa is by a wide margin, even though they debuted the same year as professionals, Katie's beaten more champions than Claressa, and her resume has more depth than Claressa's overall.
A lot of people don't like to hear that, but it's the truth.
You often hear it said that Claressa Shields looks a lot more dominant in her fights than Katie does in her fights, but that's because Katie Taylor is fighting better fighters more often than Claressa is.
Nikki Adler's no Delphine Persoon. Neither was Marie-Eve Dicaire or Christina Hammer, for that matter.
Nikki Adler's no Natasha Jonas. Neither was Marie-Eve Dicaire. Christina Hammer, she's no Amanda Serrano.
You often hear it said that Katie Taylor doesn't look as dominant in her fights as Claressa does, and well, that's put simply because there's a lot more depth at the weights where Katie campaigns than there is up there at 154, 160, and 168 pounds. The division is deeper, the talent pool is deeper.
The way it all breaks down, it'll be very difficult for a fighter to move past Claressa Shields. Move past her and occupy that number 2 spot. It'll be very difficult for any other fighter in the sport. But when it comes to Katie,
you know what it's like?
It's kind of like the difference between Devin Haney's undisputed run and Usyk's undisputed run, or Crawford's undisputed run, or Josh Taylor's undisputed run, or Jermall Charlo's undisputed run.
It's kind of like that.
Kind of. It's kind of like how, even though Devin Haney's an undisputed champion, the same way that those fighters are also undisputed champions, those fighters faced more champions than Devin did. Devin's only actually ever beaten 1 champion and taken their belts from them. Whereas those guys, they had to go through a proverbial gauntlet of champions to pick up their belts. And that's a lot more difficult.
It's kind of like that.
Kind of. Granted that Clarissa Shields did take Nikki Adler's belt from her, the other belt that she won at super middleweight was vacant. You think about the belt that she took from Christina Hammer. She did take Christina's belt, but the other belts she won at middleweight, those belts were vacant as well. And you think about her undisputed run at junior middleweight, she might have taken Marie-Eve Dicare's belt from her, but the other 3 belts she won at junior middleweight, those belts were vacant.
We've been all through this.
Every single belt that Katie picked up at lightweight, she had to take from a champion, a reigning champion. The belt she picked up at 140 pounds from Christina Lenardatu. Christina Lenardatu, who gave Alicia Baumgartner her first professional loss. The belt Katie picked up from her, the WBO title.
Every single belt Katie ever won, she won from a champion.
Now, if by some chance things go sideways between Katie against Karen Carbajal,
If Katie loses,
the rules that govern the list apply to Katie the same way they apply to anybody else. She's off the list, and Clarissa Shields will easily move into that #1 spot because she does in fact have one of the best resumes in the entire sport.
but until such a time as that happens,
Katie's #1.
don't start talking to me about who you're more impressed with, because I don't give 2 furry flamingo-shaped fucks about who you're more impressed with.
That has more to do with your feelings than these facts. The fact of the matter is, Katie Taylor and Clarissa debuted the same year as professionals, but Katie's more active and her resume is deeper.
That doesn't mean Clarissa doesn't have an excellent resume. She has an excellent resume.
Her victory over Savannah Marshall is excellent, but I'm not going to pretend beating Savannah Marshall is the same as beating Amanda Serrano or Delphine Pursoon.
It's an excellent victory for Clarissa. But we're not going to pretend that Savannah Marshall is as decorated a fighter as Amanda Serrano. She's not.
If your next argument is that Katie's fight with Amanda was a lot closer than Clarissa's fight with Savannah,
Savannah Marshall, a 7-division unified champion.
No.
Then what the fuck are we talking about here?
for now, Katie Taylor still occupies that #1 spot until further notice.
If she loses to Karen Carbajal in a few weeks' time, then Clarissa will move into that #1 spot.
In men's heavyweight news, Luis Ortiz, a common opponent between Andy Ruiz and Deontay Wilder, the former champions, he believes a deathly outcome awaits Ruiz if he faces Wilder. He'll kill Andy Ruiz. I told everybody, said Ortiz to Blue Blood Boxing TV. It's easy money. Next up for the violent puncher from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, could be the aforementioned Ruiz. However, in any event, Ortiz is convinced that despite suffering defeat at the hands of the Mexican star, a showdown against Wilder would result in a deathly outcome. He'll kill Andy Ruiz. Though Wilder has openly welcomed a matchup against the former unified champion, he recently revealed that he'll attempt to bypass Ruiz as he seeks a more appealing bout against WBA, WBO, and IBF trinket holder Alexander Usyk.
Trinket holder, he's a fucking champion. Who wrote this article?
Not just a champion, he's a unified champion. For a perspective, Deontay Wilder, after all these years, has never unified anything.
Luis Ortiz has never even won a single trinket, let alone 3 of them.
What the hell's this guy mean by trinket holder?
Why don't you watch your fucking mouth?
In the mind of Ortiz, he believes that Wilder should in fact pursue a mouth-watering showdown against Usyk, or possibly a long-awaited matchup against Joshua. As for Ruiz, Ortiz maintains that he shouldn't be allowed to move forward with his career without swapping fists against him once again. Andy Ruiz needs to give me the rematch. Give me the rematch. And you have to wonder if Luis Ortiz's evaluation has more to do with his desire to fight Andy for a second time, or more to do with his experiences against both fighters. Is he saying Wilder kills Ruiz to deter Andy from pursuing Wilder, or is he saying that because he means it?
I don't care why he's saying it. I don't want to see Ruiz versus Ortiz again.
Got enough pointless rematches in the sport of boxing? We don't need another one. The most logical fight to make for both Deontay and Andy is a fight between them, a fight between the two combatants. And given the politics of boxing and the fact that I have no faith that Wilder's handlers can deliver him a Usyk fight,
Because who's gonna pay for it?
if Fox is set to be out of boxing after this year, and they're not going to renew their deal with the PBC, and Showtime may be experiencing their own fiscal issues, their own financial problems, Who the hell's supposed to pay for Wilder versus Usyk?
Yeah, we've been all through that. I don't expect that fight to happen.
Enough of that already. The easier fight to make, and the less expensive fight to make, would be a fight between Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz. A box office fight. A box office fight I'd pay to see because...
You know, Robert Helenius, I didn't see him land a single punch on Deontay Wilder.
My prediction ahead of that fight, my pick, was Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder by way of knockout. And he delivered. He delivered the knockout. But there are still unanswered questions because the fight didn't last very long. Robert didn't get to land anything on the guy. And we don't actually know where Deontay Wilder's punch resistance is. You know, after a guy suffers 2 back-to-back defeats, the way that Wilder did, to where he takes a lot of shots throughout the course of a fight, he gets hit a lot, round by round. A guy's punch resistance...
Some guys' punch resistance ain't the same after fights like that.
Some guys, though not all, but some guys, could Deontay Wilder be one of those guys? We really don't know because Robert didn't lay a glove on him.
Didn't land a punch.
So I can't tell you whether I think this guy's punch resistance is up to scratch, or if it isn't, because Robert didn't give us that. He didn't give us that answer. Deontay Wilder took him out before he could.
And that makes a Ruiz fight intriguing. That adds to the fight's sizzle. The fact that we don't really know where Deontay Wilder is.
Based on knocking out Robert Helenius, that guy's been knocked out 2 times before. By lesser punchers than Deontay Wilder, I might add.
Ortiz thinks that Wilder would kill the guy, though.
Ortiz thinks that Wilder would kill Andy Ruiz. You know, if he lands on Andy the same way that he landed on Ortiz in their 2 fights. Maybe he's right. Maybe he isn't. We really don't know because Andy's actually got world-renowned punch resistance. The guy's got a beard. The guy's got a chin.
But you know, if you're Andy Ruiz, you shouldn't be in a hurry to find that out.
You shouldn't be in a hurry to find out if you can actually take a right hand from Deontay Wilder. What you should be is working to fight on a swivel. Keep your head off center as you close the gap. You don't come forward in a high guard.
Not just. One of those punches from Deontay might sail around the guard, hit you on the temple.
Hit you behind the ear, perhaps behind the head. It happens.
Intentionally or unintentionally, it does happen. A lot of things happen in the heat of the moment.
So Andy Ruiz absorbed a couple of straight left hands from Luis Ortiz in their bout. And, you know, I said it then. If Luis Ortiz, at his age, can nail you with a straight left hand, Deontay Wilder might be able to nail you with a straight right. Deontay Wilder's younger than Luis Ortiz, faster than Luis Ortiz, and if Luis can touch you with his backhand,
Then Wilder can touch you with his backhand.
Andy Ruiz has got to clean it up. He's got to clean it up ahead of what could be a Deontay Wilder fight. A Deontay Wilder showdown of former champions could be very beneficial for Deontay Wilder if he can knock out Andy Ruiz, who's never been knocked out, who's never been stopped.
Would be a strong message if Deontay Wilder were able to stop the guy that Anthony Joshua couldn't stop.
Joseph Parker couldn't stop him. Anthony couldn't stop him either. More recently, Luis Ortiz couldn't stop him.
Couldn't knock him out.
If Wilder succeeds in knocking out Andy Ruiz, where those fighters failed, that's some statement. It really is.
And for Andy to prevent that from happening,
he's got to tidy it up. He's got to keep his head on a swivel. Move side to side.
Keep that chin tucked, fighting at a slight crouch.
Bending at the waist to make himself as small a target as he can. As tricky a target as he can be.
He's already shorter than Deontay Wilder. Deontay's going to have to punch down to hit him.
Andy should look to counter Deontay's jab with an overhand right, or look for the right.
Look for Wilder to shoot it.
So he can slip and hook. Get off a big left. A big left upstairs, big left downstairs. But he's definitely got to keep his head on a swivel.
He's got to show more defense than what he showed against Luis Ortiz. That's for goddamn sure.
He doesn't really want to find out if he can absorb a straight right hand from Deontay Wilder. He should be looking to work around it. In reference to Deontay Wilder's last ring appearance, his pay-per-view, Boxing Insider Rick Glacier says he's being told from a high-quality source that Wilder versus Helenius' pay-per-view buy number is going to be shockingly low. Won't know the number for a few days, but told it tracked very poorly. Not surprised. The public resenting bad pay-per-view offerings is now the new norm. Thankfully so. #boxing. I was anticipating a number between 300,000 and 400,000 on the premise of sentimental boxing fans so emotionally stirred they felt compelled to buy the pay-per-view regardless of the opponent because it's Wilder, because it's his ring return. And if this story checks out and the numbers are piss poor, what are you supposed to say? Do you remember a few weeks ago Dan Raphael came out with those preliminary numbers for what Canelo vs. Golovkin 3 was supposed to have done at the box office, what it was supposed to have done on pay-per-view? Well, whether you believe those numbers or not, if Wilder's numbers are less than those numbers, you could spit in the wind and hit a Deontay Wilder fan on the internet. You get into arguments with these guys all day online. But when it counts the most, where the hell are these people? This facilitates the argument I've been making for the last 4 years, that Deontay Wilder here in America never became the same box office draw that Anthony Joshua became in his own neck of the woods in the United Kingdom. And Wilder's demand that he be given half the pot of a Joshua fight, well, you can't be serious because you're just not the same draw that guy is. You don't generate the same revenue.
You didn't generate it before. You don't generate it now.
All that ever did was make the fight that much harder to negotiate because fiscally it just didn't make any sense. This guy's not worth what Anthony's worth, and we're supposed to give him half the pot?
That's a tired fucking conversation.
Poor box office numbers is likely why the deal Fox had with the PBC has soured, and industry insiders speculate that, Fox is all but done with boxing. They're not going to pay.
They're not footing the bill for the operational costs, the production costs to do these shows.
They're just taking their fee because you're using their platform, but the buck stops there. And poor box office numbers, poor metrics are likely the reason. If they were getting the metrics from these shows that they aspired to get at the beginning of the deal, Fox would decide to renew, go all in with the PBC. Hell, give them more money if they were getting the kind of metrics they wanted to get. But they're not.
Think about Errol Spence, who made his pay-per-view debut opposite the ring. Mikey Garcia did pretty good numbers with that pay-per-view for a pay-per-view debut, but his numbers are down since then. He hasn't been able to duplicate that success with any of his subsequent pay-per-view appearances. Deontay Wilder, off his name alone, just doesn't seem to generate the same interest on his own that he generated opposite the ring Tyson Fury. He's just not a big box office draw.
It's not. No amount of tweets or Instagram comments or YouTube videos uploaded to this platform. It's not going to change that.
There is no argument that any of you can have with me.
Make this another reality check.
I honestly expected better. I did.
I don't know what the number is yet, but it doesn't sound encouraging.